Well, today we have with us someone who has been mapping the trends within the consumer space for almost 25 years, both listed and unlisted. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on board the founder and CEO of Sixth Sense Ventures, Nikhil Vora. Nikhil, hi, good morning. Good to have you on the show. We've been talking about social distancing. You've been under lockdown forever. Where have you been?
Oh, completely. It feels like ages now. Doesn't feel like 3 months for sure. Possibly it's been over 3 years since I interacted with media, especially ET. So good to be back.
Yeah, good to see you. And technology makes it possible, lockdown or not. But, Nikhil, I mean, this is one of those kind of times that's been unprecedented. No one saw it coming. No one knows how to deal with it beyond a point. We've been thinking differently. We've been consuming differently. We're going to be living differently. Just prima facie to your mind, how do you think the consumer is going to change once the lockdown begins to ease, which it already has? Because, if I were to just map what I've consumed in the last 3 months, it's besides pure play FMCG, there's been that pent up demand. You've bought your dishwashers, you've bought your supersonic vacuum cleaners, what have you. And the list hasn't gone beyond that, frankly.
Aisha, it's very interesting, right? I'm sure all of us will grapple with how the consumer behavior patterns will change over the next 5 years or next 5 months, literally, and so on. The fact of the matter is that for the last 5 decades, the consumer behavior pattern has actually not changed a bit. It's been fairly static as it's been, across all businesses and segments that one looks at. Consumers has actually been the most static of all. I think what tons of capital has not done for changing behavior pattern and new products and so on, I think this COVID movement will potentially do it. Second aspect is that because obviously consumer is a very stubborn animal, right, in its own way. So it's very tough to change that despite all the noise and capital that one pours in. The second aspect is about while the consumer behavior pattern is changing worldwide and changing quite drastically, do I see a sort of a SARS movement out here in India? Is this a demonetization movement in India? Which means that if SARS created Alibaba and Demon created Paytm to some extent, are we going to get a huge winner from COVID from India? I think the biggest challenge to me has been that e-commerce could have been one such platform in India, which should have become the COVID winner. Because, till date, India has always been a price conscious market, a discount market in e-commerce. And ideally, e-commerce should be a convenience platform. To me, it was the time for convenience in the last few months that we've seen. The irony is that even e-commerce did not deliver to the extent that they should have. And thereby, frankly, I think they've somewhere lost the COVID gain, so to speak. There is a gradual shift, but that was happening irrespective. It could have been extremely momentous for them. They could have theoretically turned profitable, which is huge given the context in which they are operating today. Somewhere, I think they missed that moment.
Okay. So what you're saying, Nikhil, is that the e-commerce platforms have in total managed to miss the COVID opportunity because, in our readings, at least during the lockdown, you made those one on Amazon as well as Reliance Mart, which is now also online purchases. Are you saying that it's going to be your local kiranas, your physical store platforms, which are going to still win over as opposed to e-commerce?
Aisha, I think there is this thing which I have it in my mind that, COVID mein kisi ne kisi ki zindagi nahi bachai, right? So if I look at all these platforms, the fact is that no one really went overboard to make a material difference to a consumer. So if, let's say, a big basket, while they possibly have grown 2x, could they have grown 5x? Could Amazon have become a lot more meaningful than what they are today? Could the e-pharmacies have done wonders? Irony is that almost everyone has missed that boat. And at the same point in time, the local kirana or the neighborhood shops have actually done a decent job to turn digital in their own formative way, which could be WhatsApp calling or WhatsApp deliveries and stuff like that. they've been much more closer to the consumer, and thereby the convenience factor, which is supermost in everyone's mind. I think they played a much stellar role than any other platform. So my feel is that you will have e-commerce, which will obviously continue to do very well, but not at the momentum that one would have thought. And you'll have the local small shop kiranas who will possibly do well. I think it's the mid-tier modern trade which will get impacted and which is getting impacted as we speak, both because of COVID as also the fact that they did not really pull it up during this point.
Okay, sure. That seems like more of a transitionary phase which is playing out right now, because you're not negating the fact that e-commerce platforms also in the process are going to get bigger. But do you think technology / e-commerce platforms have it in them to become or replace physical stores altogether anytime in the near future or even the visible future?
Oh, completely. I think what will happen is that if one is willing to take a decadal call, just as one would have taken it on media, for instance, which is closer to you guys, I personally have always believed that print will die over decades, and it's obviously happening as we speak. It becomes the push medium and so on. Media is one other aspect where content will move across platforms and not just the static platform which one sees today. I think e-com, obviously digital, more importantly, will become a platform of choice. The fact is that everyone, like you rightly said, has experienced digital purchases over the last few months. So there is at least a consumer bind which has come in. Physical retail clearly will get challenged over a period of time, and especially in formats which are non-food. I think that will surely get a lot more challenged as we move forward. So I think what would happen is that there will be for brand evolution, I think there is a need to be both physical and digital. But for a lot of other categories, I think digital might be the only way to go. So digital first brands in a lot of categories will make a lot more sense. And that's where I think newer players will come and hopefully disrupt the game. There is obviously the cost of challenging leaders in digital is a lot lower than that in physical. So I think that will surely evolve as we move forward. But clearly, if one looks at consumer categories and consumer brands, I think players who have been very, very strong offline will become a lot more relevant online too. So lead players, I think they'll do extremely well. I see this to be a very challenging period for the mid-tier companies. So mid-tier companies, companies which are, let's say, from 100 to 300-400 crores revenue in consumer brands, I think they'll find it very challenging. Even in top-tier companies and listed ones that one looks at, I think there is a differentiation in the way, let's say, a Unilever has reacted or a Reckitt has reacted to this situation. To, frankly, let's say, Imami, I think they've been found a bit wanting. So I think even in top-tier companies, there will be a differentiation which will evolve, which will be a lot more ominous for what they've been able to do till the last few decades and what possibly they will end up doing in the next few years.
Sure. Since we're on the subject of digital, Nikhil, do you think that this COVID moment could throw up big bang opportunities? I mean, could we have a Paytm / Alibaba moment emerge out of this COVID lockdown or even post?
Irony is that I think India has missed that biggest opportunity. To me, that seems to be a real fact. There are obviously pockets which will emerge and grow and become relevant. So if one looks at EdTech, for instance, now it's almost, I have twins who are 5-year-old and they are already on a digital platform, which is quite inane, right? But they're already doing that. And I think that's going to become a trend. You might possibly see 25-30% of education moving digital in some form or the other. And it's already happening as we speak. I think there will be a surge of categories which will do very, very well. So if we look at health, hygiene, home, I think these three categories seem to become a lot more dominant in a wallet share that one would look at. So if, let's say, hygiene, which was slightly elitist in nature, which was possibly less than 1-2% of wallet share, to me might move to almost 7-8% of wallet share in the next 3 months, and sustainable at that. And the fact is that not many players were part of that category anywhere. So I'm sure a lot of players, a lot of larger companies, a lot of challenger brands will want to be part of the health, hygiene, home segment. So I think it's going to be very interesting where you will see newer players who don't have a baggage will have an excellent chance to make it happen right now. And you'll have existing players who've got a dominant distribution network capitalizing on these new open trades which will open up. Fitness, supplements, health, nutrition, I think those will become pretty much the norm as we move. And I don't think that this is about a trend as of today. I think this is something which will stay. So immunity builders, supplements, I think Indians have never taken supplements. We are very, very hesitant to do it. I think you'll start to see that a lot more as we move.
Sure. That also puts under question what happens to pure play FMCG. I mean, valuations aside, and that they are trading at 60 times PE multiples, but that of course is a stock market derivative. But the whole debate about within FMCG as well, is it going to be the rural plays? Is it going to be the urban plays? I mean, a Dabur Chyawanprash has, for instance, done very well in the last 3 months. But I can't really say the same about all the other categories. Is there a trend emerging here? Are Indians going to be looking at more ready-to-eat packaged foods? Or is it going to be more, let's get back to the roots, organic food categories which are going to do well?
So it's a tough one, right? Because, I think the irony and the fact in India is that every product, every category has a market for itself. So, so it's tough to call a complete reversal where it will be. So firstly, on valuations of companies and businesses, like I look at a lot more private now than public markets, sure. But the fact is that consumer businesses very rarely collapse. So you don't see values collapse almost ever. They remain static for a long period of time, right? So you get derated, but you don't get devalued. So theoretically, ITC might remain in the same band for the next 5 years as it has been for the past 10 years. Yeah, it's been in the same band broadly. So they get derated, or so they get derated if you believe that that growth will remain very muted over a period of time, because there are enough adequate triggers which are available for generating profits and free cash and so on. So I think valuations are also subject matter of what you believe will survive for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think it's almost half of the value of consumer businesses are a derivative of the fact that they will continue to live the course for the next 20 years. That is something which you can't talk about almost any other businesses, or very few businesses you can really talk in the same league. So consumer businesses theoretically will always be slightly more richly valued. And the fact is that they will never require capital. So obviously it becomes almost a seller's choice about when they want to sell out and not really buyer's choice. Sure. Second is about whether demand patterns will evolve, the rural and urban and so on. I think that rural-urban divide, which was almost getting merged over the last few years, I think the divide has again started a bit more. In the near term, I think clearly rural demand will look a lot more better than urban demand, purely given the fact that there's been a fair bit of migration which has happened. Capital flows also obviously get driven accordingly. And there is a fair bit of impetus optically as of now, and hopefully on ground, which will be given to the rural economy and so on. But my sense is that you will always see a situation where rural generates volume growth and urban generates value growth, which is more about the product mix changeovers that you look at. So I think over a longer term, I would always think that businesses, consumer businesses in general, always look at rural to stabilize volume and urban to improve product mix and thereby value growth that one looks at. And I don't think that's changing too much. The only big changeover that I would think will also happen is that a lot of traditional consumer businesses will start to look at the digital network a lot more seriously. So let's say even a company like Colgate, which is by far the best distribution machinery in the country, along with levers, will look at going digital a lot more for maybe new products and so on. Let's say someone like Reckitt, I think they ought to be digital. Unilever, you're already seeing that move happen. So I think a lot of tier one companies will move at least 5 to 10% of their, or hope to get 5 to 10% of their revenues, which is relevant in the digital network. over the next 3 to 4 years. I think that will happen for sure.
But as a consumer pattern, Nikhil, do you think the consumer is going to get more frugal? Will you choose a cheaper Patanjali shampoo as opposed to a L'Oreal, for instance?
You know, sometimes it just feels that we are coming the entire circle. I remember maybe 5 years, 10 years back, one would look at some data points which suggest that almost 75% of Unilever's noise value was happening in premium categories, whereas 75% of their throughput was in mass categories. Yeah, so it fundamentally showed that they were moving premium, whereas obviously the selling was still mass, and they're not going to desert that part of the business. My sense is that a lot of large businesses, and it could be, let's say, Asian Paints, for instance, or a Pidilite, or a Unilever, or a Reckitt. I think they fundamentally straddle across price points. So if the market really calls for them to play the price card, I think they will do that. So there's enough ammunition that they have to do it. I'm not too sure whether it's a desertion of the lead players which will happen. I'm not really for that. But I think what will happen is that a lot of newer challengers which will evolve, and they will make it relevant, because their distribution platform will be extremely different to what the traditional distribution platform has been. And to me, that is what the consumer might really move into. So if incremental 4-5% of Indian consumers start to completely move digital, Unilever and Reckitt will take 3 to 5 years to get there. I think the newer players are fundamentally digital first. So for instance, and I might just bring in some of my investments, but let's say Bombay Shaving which is a digital first company, might have a better chance of cracking it than, let's say, a Gillette doing it, for instance. And so does a Vadam tea potentially can do it vis-a-vis a Lipton tea doing it. So I think you'll see a lot of those changes happen, which is interesting for very large companies, which will benefit from the Kirana movement and the Reliance Jio movement, which will happen as we move, and for the challengers who will take the digital route.
So, ek ke saath, ek free will win, you're saying?
Almost, yes.
Okay, or maybe though, who knows how things are going to pan out post-COVID. That also brings me to something, Nikhil, that, while the bigger brands have done what they have and they've been there for time immemorial, but all the new age brands, like you said, are digital first. And there is this whole focus on local, right? The local brands. If today someone gives you the opportunity of buying this fancy GMO product, you will choose the organic homegrown product as opposed to, something that's available in all these fancy retail stores. The government as well is now putting clear focus on choosing local as opposed to the global manufacturers. Is that a trend which could cause big disruption and thereby give rise to a wave of homegrown brands?
Aisha, again, this is a tough one, right? It's optically and in a bit of a patriotic sense, it makes complete sense to talk about local and stuff. India is a consumption-driven market. So most of the larger players who've been present in the country are almost as local as anyone can be. So, I'm not too sure whether that is the zone that one gets into completely. Again, and the products which are not local are something which are not going to be local also. It's a bit of a challenge to do that. I think what this really means, going local, is can we incentivize a lot of businesses to set up manufacturing base in the country? So I think that is something which possibly will happen. So it could happen in, let's say, products which are, for instance, if one looks at feminine hygiene category, right, as a consumer category, which is a low price product, but still had a lot of imports which were happening from China and other parts of the world. There is no real reason for that to happen, and you will see a lot more emphasis being given to those entrepreneurs or those businesses. But will it become a sort of I'm not in the zone to believe that this local movement will become such a strong driver. And also it's also a function about whether we are good enough in the quality throughput that one expects to happen for that local movement to really work significantly. And these are not things which happen overnight. It might take 3 to 5 years to really set up manufacturing bases which are of high intensity, high capital, with a proven domestic demand. In a situation where India is right now, I think the ability to put in relevant capital is going to be challenging to set up manufacturing base. I think when almost the entire corporate India, including the largest player, which is Reliance, is talking about going zero debt, fundamentally they're saying that we would not want to set up manufacturing, or they're not really looking at taking debt or long-term capital over a period of time, a mix of long-term capital and equity. So I think it's a nice moment to have. Maybe it will work in some SME, MSME businesses. Not very sure it's going to be a relevant delta per se.
Fair point. That also brings me to some of your investments, and I can't help but talk about Beera. You know, this whole thing about sin consumption and this entire ESG debate, whether or not funds are going to continue to buy ITC because larger part of their revenue comes from the tobacco business. I mean, if those visuals from the liquor stores opening in Mumbai and then they soon had to be shut are anything to go by, more than sin, this is addiction that we are talking about. But then again, you know, the near-term challenge is the state slapping all those high taxes on liquor, for instance. Do you per se think that you need to rethink investment thesis when it comes to sin consumption, that's liquor as well as tobacco?
So, there's this, when in my earlier days of an analyst, I used to talk about this a lot more, but that's true even today. The fact is that if you look at global tobacco businesses and look at global liquor businesses are valued at 3 to 4x that of global tobacco businesses. In India, it's a reversal. Tobacco businesses get valued at 4x that of liquor businesses. So, and the fact is that tobacco is a lot more sin than liquor is, which is more a lifestyle business. But that's
depends on the frequency of consumption, Nikhil.
You bet. But I think in all fairness, I think if I look at our portfolio and the way liquor businesses are, clearly Beera is the most impacted of all our companies in the portfolio today, given the fact that it's never going to be online as of now, not online. And offline channel is almost zero in the last quarter. So I think so they are the person who obviously get hit the most. Having said that, I think it's a very, very tough business to be in. Like you rightly said, there are now 30 states in India, and every state functions like their own country, and they have their own taxation and so on. There is import and export duty within states, and given the fact that liquor gets second or third largest revenue generator for states, by default there is a lot more
at stake. Yeah.
So there is always going to be a pressure of states to keep using this as their cash cows. But it also makes businesses very resilient, because there are only as many companies and businesses which can fundamentally operate in such environment. And that is the reason why you have Diageo or United Spirits, which controls 60% of the market, or United Brewery, which controls 55-60% of the market, and so on. So you have almost a monopolized business environment. So if you get a challenger brand, which hopefully Beera is, and they crack it right, which hopefully we think they will, I think you can monetize disproportionately, which I am sure we will. So I think the value prop is really about a brand which is slightly more new age, which is slightly more in sync with the consumer of tomorrow. So I think if one looks at that as a platform, I clearly think that brands like Beera have a huge outside chance of cracking it to the leaders, and thereby becoming extremely valuable.
Yeah, that also brings me to your other investment, which was also right next to our office when we were working at the office, now from home, Smashed. What happens to businesses like these? Because I don't think, it's much like going to a movie theater or a mall, and I don't think anyone's getting back in a hurry.
Oh, completely. I think, again, businesses which have been completely physical and retail infrastructure driven are someone who are most liable to risk their operations. And that would be no different for Smash also. Having created an excellent franchise of entertainment and entertainment beyond movies, I think they possibly were the only players in the country who've really cracked it well. The fact is, the bigger you scale in such a business and then you have a COVID moment, I think the impact is going to be so much more drastic for them. So clearly it's going to be extremely challenging time for them. And we just hope that they're able to come out of this. It's not going to be easy, for sure. This is a business which will require a lot more capital. This is a business which will require a lot more patience to survive this period and hope that normalcy comes back after 6 to 9 months, because it's not going to happen sooner, for sure.
Yeah. And just taking a leaf from that, do you think digitization will become a heavy part of this as well? We've been talking about, Nazara Games, for instance, and they've been talking about the heavy traffic that they've seen in the last 3 months. Will physical format gaming have to be converted to digital? And is COVID going to be that moment that's going to push them to it?
Oh, completely. Look at what you're doing right now. For a media network, I'm presuming 90% of you guys must be working from home, right?
Yep, all of us. We never dreamt in our wildest dreams that the living room could become a studio, but it has.
Yeah, but the fact is that nothing's changed. The fact is that you were able to deliver despite operating from home. And who knows, I'm operating from home and we are investing. So I think for a lot of businesses, work from home is the new normal. It would also mean there will be a lot of redundancy which will evolve over a period of time. A lot of real estate will be given off as we move forward, which is already being talked about by a lot of IT majors and so on. So I think it's going to be a huge changeover that one will see. I think it also means that there are a lot of business offshoots which will look very, very interesting. So education clearly is one vertical. Second is fitness, as we talk about. I think that will become extremely dominant. Immunity is something which will become very, very big. So, we've invested in a edtech company called Ufius, which looks very, very interesting, the way it is poised as we speak. A fitness company called Fiternity, again, a platform which we think everyone, as things go back to a bit of normalcy, will want to at least insulate themselves in some form. Immunity, supplements, again, Full Life, which is another product, another company that we've invested. I think you'll see a lot of these businesses become very relevant. Another offshoot of this entire changeover that one looks at is, and specifically for consumer businesses, I think, is this entire change which will happen from leaders, which is about, given the fact that most of them will possibly operate at 50-60% of capacity, and legacy-wise, historically, they've always operated 100%. They may not be able to go beyond 75% at any stage manufacturing. So they will by default want to start to outsource a lot more. They would want to be a lot less dependent on their own manufacturing. So for example, will a Unilever want to risk one of its plants and operations getting impacted because of COVID? It's going to be tough for Unilever to take that call. They would not want to do it. If the same thing happens to one of their contract manufacturing facilities, they'll be okay. It is not Unilever which is getting impacted, it's one of the contractors. Yeah. So I think that is again going to be a new normal, which means that you'll have decentralized manufacturing. You'll have a lot more contractual or third-party manufacturers like Hindustan Foods, again, one of our investment companies. I think you'll see a lot more salience of these players emerge. And they are, to me, the smaller winners in this entire COVID movement. There's obviously no large player, but I think these smaller players will really aggregate themselves and become relevant.
Sure. That's what's going to work, Nikhil. But as we wind down, what are consumers going to completely turn away from post-COVID?
The obvious seems to be that I think all of us now have got used to Netflix and binge watching and so on, and life seems to be okay with doing it. So you'll have smart TVs which will evolve in a very, very big manner. People will be obviously fairly hesitant in the initial. So you'll possibly see, just digressing a bit, but I think you will see a initial moment where there might be a surge of activity because suddenly people have this pent up demand of going back to a restaurant, back
vengeance,
to a and so on. I think after the initial flash, you will see people going back to their zone, and which will mean that going to movies will become a bit more. It will become a reluctant consumer going there. You would see the same for print now, right? Print, I'm presuming it's going to be such a big challenge for all the players to get back even 70-80% of their consumer base back, which means that if you lose 20-25% of your consumers, that's obscene. You've lost them forever because now everyone's gone online and so on. So I think so categories which will be relevant is clearly home, hygiene, health, fitness, supplements, essentials, healthcare, video. I think video consult again can become extremely large. Not just for healthcare, it could become for almost every activity that one looks at. So again, we've invested in a company called My Health, which does a lot of these video consults and so on. I think those will become relevant players. Players which are going to get hit clearly seem to be automobiles. I think huge one again. To come back to normalcy, to start to do a lot more discretionary purchases is going to be a bit of a challenge. Anything which literally, so real estate, I think, will be a obscenely large challenge. They were anyway in dire states in some form. I think they'll get completely challenged. Commercial real estate, I think, will be again potentially a big loser.
Also, to add to that, Nikhil, I guess all these aggregators as well are going to be hard hit, if I can call them that. The shared office space models, your WeWorks of the world. Because people are going to really rethink, if you're working from home and you can do that without any obstacles, why go to office then? And I think those platforms will be hardest hit.
Oh, completely. I should just think about the fact that, anything which was a yield asset.
Yeah.
So anything which was generating yields, and there were obviously a lot of private equity capital which has gone into yield assets.
Yeah.
I think that will get completely smashed out. One is just the challenge of occupancy to remain. Second is occupancy at what levels. And the fact is that again, zero occupancy, it's always better to get a 50% knockdown on your yield rentals, right? Or 40% knockdown on yield rentals. And to me, that is something which is surely happening. It's happening in tier 1 cities for sure. And which is really the hub model to look at, right? If 60% of economic activities is tier 1 cities, and if you see rental is completely collapsing, I think you will get very, very challenged. And that also brings to effect the pain points which will happen for a lot of financiers and financial businesses. Because as yields collapse, I think the ability to recoup higher yields is going to be very, very challenging for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Nikhil, let's wind down. You've talked about hobbies like skydiving, bungee jumping. I'm sure that's going to take a while because I think it's time before all of us or any of us are going to get to travel. So have you been salsaing at home? That's another hobby, I believe. That's easy to do at home.
I think these are all old hobbies. They continue. Right now, I think the biggest thing is about just managing the twins at home. I think that really occupies just disproportionate time and effort right now. But really learning back a lot of things. I think even as far as work goes, I think just getting yourself to be technologically not as challenged as before. I think that's clearly the new normal that one's all looking at, everyone's looking at. I think the fact is that sometimes you believe you are a lot more efficient at what you're doing, the way you are doing it right now. Obviously, you will require a physical interface very, very soon. But I think all of us are learning about how to still manage ourselves and keep ourselves in the right spirits in these trying times. It's not easy, but I think we're all slightly more privileged to be able to do it today. And I just hope that most of us in our country are able to manage that.
Yep, and we will do. I'm sure we are going to come out winners out of this. Nikhil, great to speak with you. And I hope you're not going to go under lockdown anytime soon, and we will get to interact with you more often.
Perfectly. Pleasure, Aisha. Thanks
so much. Thank you.